The road from Havre de Grace to the southern ridge of Lancaster County had long been little more than a memory, a weather-worn sliver of dirt and gravel winding through fog-wrapped hills and dense pine. By late October of 1924, most who lived near the border claimed it was the trees, not the road, that remembered best. They leaned in tighter with each year, thick with mildew and the stink of sap, as if they were trying to hide something. Sheriff Roland McRae had heard the talk. Had heard it for years. From old widows in Quarryville who swore something watched their backwoods orchards. From trapline runners out past Peach Bottom who said their steel jaws came back bent, bloodless, and sticky with something they couldn't name. Most recently, from a Mennonite farmer whose cows were found hollowed out from the inside, ribs cracked in spiraled patterns like wet wicker. They all described different signs, but they always agreed on the smell. "You ever burn meat in vinegar?" the old man had asked, eyes too wide for a man who hadn't cried at his wife's funeral. "It smelled like that. And my barn cat Lena, she went in there before I did. Didn't come back out. No noise. No blood. Just didn't come out." McRae didn't believe in stories, but he believed in patterns. And there was a new one taking shape, a trail of vanished things, not big enough to panic the county, but enough to unnerve it. The first official report had come from just across the state line, in a sloping patch of Maryland hardwoods where a Prohibition runner's truck had been found tipped over, bottles still intact, driver gone. All that remained was a set of deep impressions in the dirt, as if someone or something had walked on all fours, dragging fingers too long for any man. The bootlegging circles whispered about revenants, old world curses, something born wrong. They weren't far off. The air along the ridge had changed. Birds didn't sing. Deer kept to lower ground. And last Thursday, the sky had flashed sulfur yellow for just a blink before the rains came, a downpour so acidic it burned the paint from a local preacher's truck hood. But still, no bodies. No full ones, anyway. And now, under the growing hush of a November moon, the woods were speaking again. Something moved just past the field edge near Mount Nebo Road. McRae saw it from his porch. A flicker low to the ground, pale like newborn flesh, loping on limbs that didn't move right. At first he thought it might be a bear. Then it stood. It didn't move like anything born to this place. The shape lingered at the edge of the field, half shrouded by corn stubble and night fog. It swayed. Not with wind, not with breath. With something slower. Measured. As if each motion was remembered rather than instinctual. Sheriff McRae didn't move. Not yet. The lantern at his feet sputtered against the damp air, its weak glow casting shadows that stretched too far, bent too wrong. The thing turned. It didn't have a face, at least not in any way that made sense. The size of a man. Maybe bigger. Pale, slick skin that glistened like pork fat left too long in the sun. Its limbs hung loose at first, but then they stiffened, lengthened, peeled into new shapes, as though the body had forgotten what bones were supposed to be. Then it made the sound. Like a baby, almost. Wet, breathy syllables that barely held together. Just noise. But wrong. Familiar in the way a dream remembers your mother's voice but off. Mocking it. Something in McCrae's chest locked up. He'd heard dying men before, but never that. It took a step forward. Then another. Not fast. Not slow. Just committed. He raised his rifle. Didn't aim. Didn't blink. It stopped just past the fence line. Its body shifted again, skin retracting in segmented folds like something molding. Parts of it gleamed in the moonlight, strips of raw red muscle, spines pushing through like crooked fence posts, a gash where a mouth should be, opening sideways. Rows of teeth. Then more rows. And somewhere behind them, something that looked like a tongue, but moved like a hand. It whispered. Not a word. Just sound. Wet and deliberate. He fired. The shot cracked through the trees and echoed back, louder than it should have been. The shape didn't fall. It flinched. Twitched. Its legs buckled sideways, arms splitting into too many joints. Then it laughed. Just a hiccup. One breath. A mimicry. And then it ran. Not away. Past him. Through the dark. Into the orchard. He gave chase without thinking. Not because he thought he could catch it. Because he had to know where it would go. The fog thickened. Branches clawed at his coat. He saw flashes ahead, something pale weaving between trunks, faster than any man. And then it stopped. In the clearing. Beneath the orchard's oldest tree. The leaves were black here. Rotten in the middle of fall. At the base of the tree was a hole. Fresh. Too clean. Like something had bored straight through the earth, then lined the tunnel with spit. And the thing crawled into it, backwards. Head last. Watching. Still smiling with that split open mouth. Then it was gone. And the smell hit him. Burnt vinegar. Milk left out too long. And something else. Something floral. He turned. The orchard behind him was no longer silent. Something else had moved. He wasn't alone. McCrae stumbled backward, boots sliding in the muck as his lungs seized around the stench. The tree pulsed just once, as if the earth itself had taken a breath. Then it went still. He turned to run. But his legs wouldn't move right. Not at first. Like the cold had climbed into his bones and decided to stay. His vision swam. The edges of the world went soft. Something moved between the trees behind him, something quieter than the creature had been. Smaller. Faster. Or maybe just nearer. He didn't look. Didn't dare. He ran. Tripped once on a root that hadn't been there on the way in. Slammed his shoulder into a low branch and didn't feel the bark tear his coat. Just the pressure in his chest, like he'd left part of himself back in that clearing. Something watching from inside him now. Something remembering. The tree line broke and he hit the fence with both hands, vaulted over like a younger man, and landed hard on the other side. Gravel tore into his palms as he crawled the last stretch back to his porch, breath ragged, heart wild. He didn't go inside. Not at first. He sat on the steps, shotgun across his knees, eyes on the trees. Nothing followed. No sound. No breath. But he knew it wasn't over. Morning came slow, with gray light and frost clinging to the railings. When the sun finally burned through the fog, McCrae stood. He walked inside, locked the door, and poured a drink with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. He didn't file a report. Didn't mention it at church. Didn't even write it in his ledger. But 2 nights later, he told the story. Just once. To a man from down near Drumore Township who asked why the sheriff looked like he hadn't slept in days. A man who claimed he'd lost 2 goats without a trace. A man whose dog now wouldn't cross the threshold of the barn. McCrae told him. Told him what he saw. What he smelled. What he ran from. He left out the smile. He didn't have to include it. The man already knew. They always did. It started with the livestock. Always does. A mare in Conowingo was found dead in her stall, not ripped apart, peeled. Like the skin had been rolled back in sections, precise and almost surgical. No blood. No footprints. Just a trail of thick, bile-colored mucus leading out the back of the barn and into the trees. 3 nights later, a dairy farmer near Buck reported hearing something in his grain silo. Thought it was raccoons. Climbed up with a lantern and a rifle. They found the lantern smashed at the base of the ladder. The rifle was still up there, resting perfectly along the edge. No sign of the man. Just his boots. Still tied. Still upright. Then the children started talking. They said there was a baby in the trees. A big one. Bigger than them. It called to them sometimes in the early hours before dawn, using their mother's voice. But when they looked outside, all they saw were 2 yellow lights hovering low near the roots. One girl swore it waved at her. Another said it tried to crawl up the side of her house but couldn't figure out how windows worked. In Kirkwood, an old woman put a knife through her radio. Said it started playing voices she hadn't heard since her husband died in the trenches. Said it laughed when she tried to shut it off. Said she saw something reflected in the chrome, something that moved behind her even though she lived alone. By early December, a deputy out of Bart Township disappeared. They found his cruiser with the engine still running and the door open. His hat was on the dash. His sidearm was missing. In the snow beside the road were drag marks. Not footprints. Not tracks. Just long, deep impressions like something had slithered, been pulled into the ditch. The snow around the marks had melted. What was left behind bubbled slightly. Smelled like vinegar. And then came the church bell. It rang at 2:17 a.m. in the village of Wakefield. No one pulled the rope. The pastor swore it hadn't worked in years. But everyone on that hill heard it. Loud. Clear. Calling. The next morning, the cellar under the church was empty. The bones in the ossuary had been rearranged. Spelled something. Something no one wanted to read aloud. They boarded up the windows. Hammered shut the doors. And still, at night, they say you can hear crying beneath the floorboards. A baby's cry. Wet. Inhuman. In the taverns of Port Deposit and the backrooms of Delta, the talk turned sour. Not the usual griping over taxes or the thickening mud of early winter. This was older. Slower. Like the land itself had started whispering again, and the old families remembered how to listen. In the southern corners of Lancaster County, in the places where the roads turned to gravel and the electric lines thinned, the stories were being told again, not as warnings, but as confirmation. They called it the Hollow One, or Yellowjaw, or sometimes just it. No real name, no agreed description. But the bones of the tale were always the same. Too big to be a child. Too wrong to be a man. It watches. It waits. It mimics. And when it comes, you don't scream. You pray it doesn't learn your voice. In Rising Sun, a preacher from out west started holding cleansing gatherings after one of his congregation claimed her baby had tried to speak in her dead brother's voice. A voice the infant should never have known. She said it asked her where she buried the dog. A dog no one else remembered. In Whiteford, hunters returned with stories of something that wasn't quite deer and not quite shadow. Something that didn't move like a four-legged animal but glided, almost boneless, between trees. One man claimed it followed him home, that he could hear it breathing just beyond the edge of the porch light. He boarded up his windows. His dog stopped barking. 2 nights later, both were gone. Along the Mason-Dixon line, farmers started hanging lanterns in the trees. Not to ward it off. To see it coming. They claimed it hated the light but loved to pretend otherwise, would let you think it was gone, lull you into sleep, then press its face to the glass just long enough for you to doubt what you saw. And in the morning, you'd find something missing. Not always a person. Sometimes just the memory of one. Letters arrived in Quarryville from family in Harford County warning them not to travel after dark. One note, scrawled in shaky hand and unsigned, reads simply, "Don't whistle near the wood line." It whistles back. And then the dreams began. Not just bad dreams. shared ones. Whole stretches of town waking up with the same image stuck behind their eyes: a tunnel beneath a tree, a split open smile, and the sound of something crawling on all fours, whispering a single word: Mama. And even the men who didn't believe in ghosts, who didn't flinch at a raccoon scream or a snapping branch, they started to admit it. Something was out there. Something old. Something learning. The monster did not vanish. It simply learned to wait. When the banks failed and bread lines stretched through Columbia City Square, when men in Ephrata sold their tools for paper that wasn't worth the heat it could burn, no one spoke much about the yellow eyes in the orchard. The farms dried. The coal shipments slowed. And the country turned its face inward, dragging what little faith remained into radios and Roosevelt's promises. But in the hills deep, unpaved, unspoken Lancaster and the edge-blood towns of northern Maryland, the old warnings were not forgotten, just quieted. In Holtwood, a boy named Eli disappeared after school. His boots were found 3 days later, sitting upright at the top of the river bluff, dry as bone. One was still tied. They buried a casket with nothing in it. His mother never spoke again. Her mouth stayed open, as if she was still listening for a word that never came. In Darlington, a young woman wandered into town barefoot at dusk, clothes shredded, eyes blank. She said only one thing: it wore his hands. No one ever found the man she referred to, or what had been left of him. But who had time to listen? Who could afford to care? Factories were burning in Europe. Children were being buried in Shanghai. And every radio pulse that reached Pennsylvania reminded them that a bigger terror had arrived, one that wore jackboots and carried flags. Draft letters replaced milk deliveries. The young men of Bard, of Millersville, of New Freedom, packed up their lives and went to war with countries they'd never heard of. And as the bodies came back folded in triangle flags, the smaller griefs, the missing, the whispers, the wet stains near cellar doors were lost to smoke and silence. Sheriff McRae died in 1937. Stroke in his sleep. The coroner found his notes months later, boxed in a crawl space behind the old county courthouse. Pages and pages of undocumented sightings, clipped obituaries, and hand-drawn maps with ink circles around the oldest trees in Drumore, Marduk, and the South Branch. No one catalogued it. No one read it. The new sheriff, a younger man from Leeds, tossed the whole pile in the bin marked Folklore. But the thing in the trees didn't stop. It grew quiet, yes. But it watched. It learned. It wore the faces of drafted sons. It spoke in the tones of telegram boys. It knocked on doors dressed in shadows, and smiled when they opened. And somewhere, beneath the frozen soil of a forgotten orchard, the tunnel deepened. New bones joined the old ones. New voices echoed in the dark. And the world, with its eyes on bombs and borders, never noticed the thing that had never left. It was still here. still hungry. It started with sickness. Not the kind a doctor could treat. People in the border towns got pale, thin. Not wasting away from hunger, they still had bread, still had broth, but from something older. A kind of rot that crept behind the eyes, stole sleep from the inside out. Men walked into the woods and came back shaking, teeth chattering in July heat. Women bled from the nose without cause, and infants stopped crying as if they'd already learned there was no point. In rising sun, the town blacksmith's wife was found curled in the barn with a Bible clutched to her chest, whispering verses that didn't exist. Her nails were packed with dirt. When they pulled her away, she screamed one word over and over: listen. Not look. Not run. Listen. And people began to listen. They heard tapping on the windows after midnight, whistling in corn rows where no wind blew, footsteps in the attic of the church, heavy ones, like something crawling upright with knees bending the wrong way. The final straw came in early spring. A schoolteacher from Nottingham tried to drive home along Route 1 after visiting her sister in Port Deposit. Her car was found wrapped around a tree, engine still warm. Her body was never recovered. But the driver's side door was open. The inside was lined with fingernail marks, deep, frantic grooves torn into the vinyl. And so they decided they would close the road. Not all of it, just the part that mattered. The stretch that ran from Rising Sun to Nottingham, where the woods pressed closest and the fog never fully lifted. They came with axes, with sledgehammers, with pickaxes stolen from barns. A pastor and 2 teenagers died when a section of the bridge caved in beneath them. One man, a retired miner, was dragged screaming into the tree lean by something no one saw. They didn't go after him. They kept working. They pulled down trees and let them fall across the asphalt. They set fire to the old mile markers. They dragged junked cars into a wall of twisted rust and broken glass. They painted signs: not safe, do not enter, turn back, and nailed them into anything that would hold. When it was done, the road wasn't gone. But it wasn't passable. Not easily. And that was the point. It worked, for a while. People stopped taking the shortcut. Tourists got spooked by the rumors. Delivery trucks rerouted. Mail came late but still came. For a moment, the dying slowed. But the road was never the problem. They'd made it harder to go in. But nothing stopped it from coming out. The woods pressed closer each season. Trees died standing up. Birds stopped nesting. Dogs gave birth to stillborn litters. At night, people still heard the voices. Sometimes they sounded like family. Sometimes they sounded like their own. And every now and then, someone would wake up at the edge of town, barefoot and shivering, whispering about a mouth with too many teeth, and a face that tried to wear theirs like a mask. And even though Route 1 was broken, bleeding, barricaded by the desperate, It still ran two ways. And it always would. The night air was cool, not cold. The kind of spring evening where breath didn't fog and parents wore old sweaters out of habit more than need. The lights over the field buzzed like angry wasps, casting long shadows over the grass as the game dragged into its last inning. The stands were half full, just enough clapping and hollering to drown out the hum of rural silence. It was a Thursday. A school night. The kids should have been home by now. But it was the last game of the season, and everyone stayed a little longer. Coaches shaking hands. Parents taking photos under the flickering scoreboard. Cleats tapping against pavement as kids ran off to grab snacks from the concession shed behind the field. That's where it started. Mason Price, age 9. Missing his left shoe when they found the trail. Cody Heller, 10. Always wore his glove, even off the field. They found it torn in half at the tree-line, leather stretched and peeled like animal hide. And Lila Quinn, 8. Small, quiet, laughed with her whole face. Her windbreaker was later discovered 20 feet up in a pine tree. Still zipped. No one saw them go. No one heard anything. 1 second they were there, lined up with juice boxes and candy sticks. The next they weren't. Parents thought they were playing in the dark, maybe hiding near the dugouts. Coaches called out, voices already frayed by unease. Flashlights came out. Phones lit up. Someone ran to the parking lot to check the cars. Others started searching the woods behind the field, though no one wanted to go far. By the time the state troopers arrived, half the town was there. No sirens. No loudspeakers. Just that strange, pressing quiet that happens when everyone's afraid to ask what they already know. They followed the tracks. Mud disturbed behind the snack shed. A smear on the fence post. One sneaker. Then nothing. Just the woods. Cold. Watching. A few officers pushed deeper into the trees. Only 2 came back before sunrise. One of them wouldn't speak. The other had scratch marks down both arms and swore he heard something moving under the leaves, not over them. The game was never rescheduled. The field was closed within a week. Fenced. Chained. Lights removed. And still, on certain nights, you can see them, those same lights flickering on, one by one, even though the power's been shut for years. The field sits quiet. Empty. But sometimes, if you stand near the dugout, you'll hear a sound behind you. Like cleats on concrete. Like someone small, just out of sight, calling your name in a voice that's almost right. Almost. It started with the smell. Not rot. Not death. Something stranger. Like copper boiling in vinegar. Like old milk under a hot sun. It clung to the lower hills of Peach Bottom for 3 days before anyone spoke up. The farms down there were quiet, always had been. Most of the houses were old stone, nestled into the land like teeth in a tired jaw. Folks kept to themselves. Knew better than to call in outsiders when something felt wrong. But wrong doesn't care if you name it. On the fourth night, every dog south of Woodbine started barking. All at once. Long, low howls that rose and fell in perfect unison, like they were answering a command. By morning, 17 of them were dead. No blood. No wounds. Just snapped. Twisted. Spines coiled like corkscrews, jaws locked open. Then the power started flickering. First the outer farms. Then the center of town. Lights dimmed. Radios spat static. Phones rang once and never again. The Peach Bottom substation claimed it was a surge. Said they were sending a truck. It never came. That night, the screaming started. It came from the Grissom property first. Old barn up the ridge. No one had lived there since the fire in '29. But the neighbors swore they saw lights inside, lanterns swinging, figures moving in pairs. Sheriff's deputies found the front door unlatched. Dust undisturbed. No footprints. Just claw marks in the walls, fresh and deep, like something had been pacing. Circling. There were voices on the second floor, they said. Not yelling. Not even speaking. Just repeating. One word. Again and again. Home. They never found the source. 3 days later, the Henderson family disappeared. All 4 of them. Dinner still on the table. Chairs pulled back. Door unlocked. The family dog was found pacing circles in the backyard, eyes milky white, howling through a torn throat. After that, no one went to the ridge. People packed what they could carry and left in the night. No goodbye. No for sale signs. Just engines rumbling in the dark and houses left with lights on and no one inside. By the end of the week, 13 properties sat abandoned. By the end of the month, Peach Bottom was sealed. They claimed it was chemical runoff. Said the quarry had ruptured a containment well. Built a fence. Sent a crew. The crew never came back. Now the fence is half collapsed. The signs are sun-bleached and torn. But no one crosses it. Not anymore. Because every so often, on the far edge of what used to be Peach Bottom, someone swears they see light. Not a house. Not a car. A single lantern. Swinging side to side. Held by something tall. Pale. With limbs too long and a voice too small. Calling out. Asking for a way back. Asking for home. The war ended and the headlines moved on. Men returned home missing pieces of themselves, arms, legs, whole years swallowed by fire and ocean. Towns welcomed them with parades and bunting, brass bands, and warm whiskey. Flags flew. Newspapers screamed victory. And the old terror of Peach Bottom and the ridgelines of southern Lancaster was quietly folded into the same drawer as folk tales, moonlit nonsense, and backwoods delirium. No one listened. They had seen too much real horror to care about old roads and strange whispers. The U.S. government decommissioned several observation posts in the region. Nothing ever came of the quiet investigations, the quieter disappearances of agents who went poking into the wrong fields. Files were sealed, then forgotten. The official story: ground gas leaks, mass hysteria. One memo, declassified in the 70s, referred to the area as a rural mythos sink. Another called it environmentally sensitive to psychological suggestion. They never called it what it was. They never used the word alive. And the locals, they gave up. They stopped putting up signs. Stopped issuing warnings. The barricades on Route 1 rusted, fell, were picked apart by souvenir hunters. Schools in Havre de Grace taught normal curriculums again. Churches in Drumore stopped holding midnight vigils. The last sheriff to take the stories seriously retired in silence and burned his own case files in a field behind his house. Travelers kept coming. Young couples looking for scenic routes. Bikers craving back roads. College kids chasing ghost stories on dares. Families moving north, moving south, passing through like the land was nothing but hills and trees and old soil. Some of them made it. Some of them didn't. And every so often, someone would stumble back out. Covered in mud. Eyes wrong. Not quite able to speak. Sometimes they'd laugh. A sharp, wet sound that echoed all wrong. Sometimes they'd cry and couldn't say why. And sometimes they said just one thing. It saw me. The locals heard. And turned away. They didn't argue. Didn't explain. Didn't bother. Because the road always takes. And the thing in the woods doesn't need permission. It only needs time. And time it has. Autumn came heavy in 1948. The leaves turned early, dried to brittle husks that snapped underfoot like old teeth. The deer stopped moving through the thickets. The birds migrated too soon. Hunters in the southern stretches of Lancaster County claimed the woods had gone quiet, not empty quiet. And quiet, they'd learned, was worse. A pair of newlyweds from Baltimore went missing just outside of Muddy Run. Their car was found nosed into a ditch, passenger door open, keys still in the ignition. No sign of struggle. No blood. Just two sets of boot prints, one smaller than the other, walking calmly into the forest. The last footprint was a bare one. Not human. Toes too long. Arch too narrow. Heels shaped like a child's except twisted sideways. The couple was never seen again. A week later, a trucker making a delivery to a quarry in York County cut through the lower ridgeline. He never made the drop. His rig was found 4 miles into the tree-line, half wrapped in bramble that looked woven, as if someone or something had been building with it. Inside the cab, the radio was still playing. Soft static, with a voice beneath it. It repeated a phrase every few minutes, though no one could make sense of the language. Something like a lullaby. Something like a command. They towed the truck, but not the trailer. No one wanted to open the latch. After a week, the steel started to rust from the inside. It was gone by the next storm, washed down the hillside like it had never existed. Locals knew better than to investigate. They'd tried. In '49, a group of 3 boys from Delta tried to hunt the thing. Took 2 rifles and a collie named Duke. They made it as far as the edge of the old orchard in Wakefield. 2 came back. One with a broken leg and fingernail-sized punctures along his arms. The other wouldn't speak. Just sat in his bedroom every night, staring out the window at trees that weren't there. Duke never came back. After that, they stopped talking. The kids. The families. The towns. Silence became the only protection. Ignorance became armor. The new residents, the passers-by, the ones who scoffed at stories, let them camp near the quarry. Let them cut through Route 272 on a foggy night. Let them follow those voices calling from under the bridge at Fishing Creek. Because the locals had learned the truth. You couldn't save someone who didn't believe they were in danger. So they locked their doors. Kept to the paved roads. Never whistled after dark. Never answered their name if they heard it spoken from behind. Especially not if it sounded like someone they loved. And somewhere beneath the root-choked hills, behind the decaying husks of barns no one would reclaim, the thing listened. It waited. Not patient. Just confident. It had all the time in the world. And as time passed and more died from the creature, the locals called it a day. They knew how to stay alive. It wasn't their problem if the outsiders didn't. And in time the government gained interest in this creature. So they needed more data, and more data requires more bodies. They did it without ceremony. No ribbon, no press. Just a memo filed with the State Highway Department in September of 1978, Restoration of Transit Corridor 1AB, Maryland-Pennsylvania Connector. Locals called it something else. Opening the grave. The feds came first, men in brown jackets, heavy boots, clipboards that didn't get wet even when it rained. They brought in road crews, survey teams, a few fresh-faced scientists with high collars and silver instruments that blinked in ways compasses never should. They said the land was clear. That no real ecological threat remained. That the stories were old fear stitched into old soil. They paved over what they didn't understand. Trees were cut. Roads widened. Signs replaced. The junked barricades were dragged away in pieces, burnt, rusted, overgrown with vines. a backhoe operator claimed he saw something moving under the asphalt as they broke it up. He quit the next morning, drove south, and never picked up his last paycheck. Within 6 months, Route 1 was alive again. Big rigs rolled over the earth like nothing had happened. Families packed station wagons full of kids and drove it as a shortcut to Lancaster's outlets. Tourists looking for Amish crafts and homemade fudge passed within feet of fields where blood had soaked into dirt so deep it still bloomed red tulips in winter. Locals didn't drive it. They never would. And they didn't try to stop it. Not anymore. Because by then, they knew better. They knew the land didn't forget. And they knew the thing hadn't been waiting behind the barricades, it had been waiting for the road to open again. And it did. Within a year, the disappearances returned. A postal worker delivering up through Oxford vanished halfway through his route. The mail truck was found idling, the seat belt buckled. Not unbuckled, buckled. Like someone else had put it on. Like something else had tried to understand the role. Then came the hiker, a woman from New Jersey. Last seen taking photos near the edge of Drumore. Her camera was found in a ditch, still recording. The final 30 seconds showed trees. Then static. Then something like a face, but not close enough to be clear. Skin the color of wax paper. Lips moving like they were still learning how. They ran the footage in slow motion. There was sound. Faint. A child's voice. Whispering. Is this right? Is this what you want? And still, the road stayed open. The state funded a rest stop. It closed 6 weeks later. They never gave a reason. Now, the pumps are empty. The lights flicker at night even without power. Sometimes, travelers still pull off there by accident, looking for a bathroom. Sometimes, they come back. But not always as themselves. The road is clean now. Fresh blacktop. Reflective paint. But it still runs through old blood. And the thing beneath the trees. It never needed an invitation. Just an opening. Truth be told, the reopening of Route 1 was never about infrastructure. Not really. The files don't say monster. They don't say creature or entity or unclassified biological hazard. The language is colder. Cleaner. Sanitized for committee review. Subject exhibits nonlinear predatory patterning. Area demonstrates repeat loss of civilian contact with consistent topographic clustering. Recommend controlled civilian exposure to track behavioral variables. That last line shows up a lot. The public never saw the reports. But the ones who signed them, men with short hair, pale knuckles, and eyes that didn't blink enough, they knew. They'd known since the 30s. Since those agents went missing near Peach Bottom and a military dog came back missing half its face, still breathing. They didn't burn the orchard. They built cameras around it, disguised as utility poles, camouflaged against the bark. And when the thing stopped appearing, when the old teeth of the land seemed to settle, they waited for decades. Then they built a model, a theory. Predation curve suggested the thing needed stimuli, variety, patterns to mimic, emotions to feed from. The working term was echo-driven predator, a creature that doesn't hunt prey, but identity, that learns its victims before it eats them. Which meant if it was dormant, it wasn't gone, it was starving. So they reopened Route 1. They called it rural redevelopment. Put a few contractors on the payroll. Restored roads. Cleared paths. But they didn't clear the land. They didn't touch the orchard. Because that wasn't the goal. They wanted more missing hikers. More frightened kids. More broken down cars. They needed the thing to wake up. And it did. Within the first year of reopening, disappearances rose by 200%. Local law enforcement filed 37 unexplained reports. None of them made it past regional review. Because there were men now suits with sealed briefcases stationed in Lancaster County under the title Environmental Survey Oversight. They wore badges but had no agency. Drove unmarked cars. Showed up at scenes before the sheriff's office. Left without names. They interviewed witnesses. Collected biological samples. Took soil. And they never, ever, tried to stop it. Because the truth was simple. They weren't there to protect the people from the thing. They were there to protect the thing from being known too soon. They wanted data. And data needs bodies. The road was the bait. The woods were the mouth. And the thing was learning again. The footage aired only once. Late night, local channel. WLYH-TV out of Lebanon. A grainy, jittery segment buried between a weather rerun and a report on a missing teenager from Havre de Grace. Most viewers thought it was a prank. A hoax. One of those sensational local stunts designed to boost late-hour ratings. It wasn't. The video came from a Panasonic VX camcorder found half buried in silt along the banks of the Octoraro Creek, not far from the blacktop stretch where Route 1 cuts just north of the Old Orchard Trail. The hiker, Andrew Callum, 27, had been missing for 2 weeks. An out-of-towner from Pittsburgh. Nature enthusiast. Part-time poet. Real quiet. He'd gone in looking for old trail markers. They found his camera. They never found him. The footage begins with normal trail scenery, wind in the trees, creek water murmuring, the soft crunch of boots on gravel. Andrew speaks a few times. Names trees. Points out animal tracks. Then the light changes. Not sunset. A dimming. Like something stepping over the sun. He gets quiet. The camera jostles. He whispers, "Something's following me." And then 23 seconds later he turns the lens. It's standing in the clearing. At first, it looks like a child. Pale. Wet. Shivering. But too tall. Wrong. Its body twitching in small, involuntary jerks. Like it's learning how to move while moving. Its skin is sickly. A corpse yellow slick with sweat and mucus. Segmented in some places like an insect. Bone juts from the flesh spines and ridges where shoulders should be, like someone tried to carve a human shape but forgot how muscles work. Its chest breathes in shallow spasms. Its arms end in claws. Its feet aren't feet. Its jaw begins to split. Not open. Apart. Sideways and down like a flower blooming wrong. Rows of teeth. Then more rows. Inside the mouth, another mouth. Inside that, something small and sharp and wet, flexing like a hand, like it's waving. And then it speaks. Clear. Not a whisper. Not a mimic. A voice. Hi. Innocent. Mommy. Daddy. The camera shakes. Andrew sobs. Breathes too hard. Something in him breaks. He drops the camcorder and runs. For 32 seconds, the camera lies crooked in the dirt, recording nothing but leaf mold and shadows shifting too fast to follow. Then a shape bends into frame. It's the creature. Now crawling. Its body elongates, segments opening and closing in sick, wet pulses revealing organs, tendons, pieces of anatomy that don't have names. A rib pushes out. A tendril flexes and drags. One of its hands is shaped like a foot. The other has fingers. But they're wrong. And just before the footage cuts out, before static devours the screen and the camera dies, it leans in. Its face fills the frame. It smiles. And in a voice that doesn't belong to any human, but understands humans well enough, it says, "Do you love me now?" The news station pulled the clip within the hour. Said it was doctored. A hack. But people recorded it. People shared it. And those who had seen it before, the ones who knew the old stories, the ones who remembered the orchard, the road, the teeth. They knew. The thing had learned. It could speak. It could lie. And worst of all, it could pretend. They came in waves. Campers in the 80s. College kids in the 90s. Tech junkies in the 2000s looking for dead zones to disappear into. Travel vloggers in the early 2010s, chasing local legends with drones and GoPros and Instagram captions like "Abandoned Orchard Challenge Gone Wrong, face screaming in fear." And it always went wrong. Sometimes they vanished clean. Tent left zipped. Fire still warm. Phones in airplane mode and untouched. Their last messages were mundane: made it to the ridge, setting up now, no service but all good. Then nothing. Others weren't so lucky. They found what was left of a geology major from Penn State in 1994 curled inside the hollow of an old sycamore, jaw unhinged, fingernails shredded down to bone. No sign of trauma, just sheer, unfiltered terror. His brain had liquefied inside his skull. The coroner called it a catastrophic neurovascular collapse. The locals called it the Echo Kiss. 2001, a pair of survivalists trying to film a documentary near Holtwood. The video ends with the cameraman's breath hitching, the lens shaking, and a voice soft, deliberate saying, "You're doing great. You're doing just fine. Keep walking." The screen goes black. The camera was found still rolling. No bodies. 2008, a state police officer follows up on a report of singing near a collapsed barn outside Wakefield. His cruiser is located the next morning with the driver's seat soaked in bile. His service weapon had been disassembled screw by screw and laid out in a perfect spiral across the hood. The officer's name, badge number, and mother's maiden name had been etched into the windshield from the inside. They issued a gag order. No one asked questions. In 2011, a local teenager, Lena Dorsey, live-streamed herself exploring the Orchard Trail at night. Commenters joked at first, teased her for chasing clout. Then the connection cut out with a single, final frame, her flashlight beam catching two small, yellow orbs just above the ground. Eyes too far apart. No blink. The chat replayed that last second for days. Did it smile? Did it blink sideways? Was it behind her the whole time? Lena was never found. The state labeled it a developing area of concern. But by 2018, the body count had passed 300. Unofficially, no government agency claimed jurisdiction. No investigation stuck. And still, Route 1 remained open. The Orchard Trail remained unclaimed. The woods remained unburned. And the locals, they'd stopped trying altogether. No signs. No fences. No warnings. Because now, it wasn't a secret. Now, it was a choice. And if someone drove down that road, past the ruins of the old rest stop, beyond the reach of cell towers and common sense, if they saw the lantern swinging in the orchard and still went closer, then they deserved what waited. Because by 2018, the thing no longer had to hunt. It could invite. And invite it did. Not with letters. Not with flyers. Not with teeth. Not at first. It used voices now. Perfect ones. It knew the cadence of a mother whispering her child's name from another room. It could hum lullabies that hadn't been sung aloud in 50 years. It could say "help me" in the exact voice of someone you'd lost. It called over CB radio. It left voicemails on disconnected phones. It appeared in the static between satellite stations, whispering coordinates that didn't exist on any map. In 2018, 3 boys from Coatesville got a text from an unknown number. The message read, "The stars are wrong but the orchard is open. Come see." They went. One made it back. He was found in the early morning, clothes soaked, eyes pale as quartz. His jaw had been dislocated, like it had been stretched to scream and never snapped back. He couldn't speak. He just wrote on the hospital wall with his finger in dried blood, "It wants to be found." That same week, 47 people posted online about hearing a song coming from their baby monitors. All different towns. All different brands. Same tune. No lyrics. Just that music box melody, slow and crackling, followed by a voice. A child's voice. Asking, "Are you still watching?" The answer, more often than not, was yes. By the fall of that year, sightings had increased tenfold. People weren't just vanishing, they were being seen before they vanished. Seen standing in the middle of Route 1 at 3:14 a.m., barefoot and soaked, whispering into the woods like they were answering roll call. Seen smiling into trail cameras they didn't set up. Seen in 2 places at once. And then the orchard bloomed. In October 2018, with no seasonal cue, the dead trees flowered. Bone-white petals. Sappy, bleeding fruit. No birds. No bees. But a scent thick and sweet like honey overwrought. And hanging from one of the lower branches, a child's shoe. New. Clean. Facing the road. It was an invitation. Not shouted. Not warned. Just offered. And every year since, more have answered. The woods were colder than usual that night. Not seasonally. Elementally. The kind of cold that hummed behind your teeth, not on your skin. Where the wind didn't move through trees, it paused in them. Watched with them. Listened. The young man stood at the edge of the old orchard trail. His coat was thin. His breath hung low. One hand rested on the strap of his backpack, the other dangling loose, fingers twitching slightly like he was waiting for something, though he wouldn't have said what. Crunch. A stick snapped somewhere to the left. He didn't turn. Another sound. Lighter. Wet. A dragging sound. Like skin over moss. Still, he stayed. In the darkness between trees, something shifted. A silhouette, tall, lurching, crooked at the joints like it had to remember how legs worked. Just for a second. Less than that. A flicker. Gone as soon as it came. The man tilted his head. Not startled. Not frozen. Just curious. The woods answered. A soft clicking. Like a metronome made of knuckles. Then closer. Mama. The voice was small. Innocent. Practiced. The man blinked, his face unreadable. Another step. Leaves shuffled. Something heavy moved behind a stump, slithering between trees, staying just out of view. The kind of movement that didn't disturb branches, just rearranged shadows. Then closer again. "Do you hear me?" A whisper. Clear. From behind him. He turned. There just for a moment in the periphery. The shape. Too tall. Too smooth. Jaw starting to bloom open. But his eyes didn't widen. No gasp. No scream. He only nodded once. Slow. Deliberate. Like recognition. And said, low but steady, "I was wondering when you'd come." For the first time in years. Maybe decades. The thing stopped moving. No more crunching. No more whispering. Just the sound of wind finally realizing it was being watched. The creature slipped backward into the trees. Not in fear. Not in defeat. In confusion. It had learned every kind of scream. Every kind of run. Every flavor of fear. But not this. Not stillness. Not acceptance. It waited for him to follow. He didn't. He just stood. And smiled. Not cruelly. Not mockingly. Just knowing. The woods held their breath. The invitation remained unspoken. And the thing, the predator, the mimic, the thing with no name. It blinked. The game escalated. The thing moved low, now lower than before, limbs disjointed, hunched in its favorite way, spine coiling and uncoiling like a wet rope. It circled him again, keeping always just beyond the tree line. It snapped a thicker branch this time. Loud. Deliberate. Close. The young man only tilted his head toward the sound. Not startled. Still. Then he laughed. Just once. Dry. That the best you've got? The trees answered with nothing. No birds. No crickets. Just a low, drawn-out wet shuffle across the underbrush. The thing paced now with weight, stepping deliberately on dry sticks, dragging its claws against bark, groaning in that high, broken infant's voice it had perfected over years of mimicry. "Come find me." It waited for the flinch. None came. The man shifted his stance slightly, more comfortable than cautious. His breath came in steady plumes. He raised his voice, not fearful, not mocking, just firm. "I know what you are. You're not some nightmare." He turned in a slow circle. "You're just a scared little thing. Still crawling. Still learning. A lost baby." He said it again, louder this time. "Scared. Infant." The woods twitched. Something clicked twice, fast behind a tree. The silhouette flashed again, more of it this time. The torso expanding, splitting, rows of spines protruding down its back like broken piano keys. Its jaw opened in sections, teeth yawning wide around that twitching inner tongue. It showed itself for longer now. A whole second. Maybe two. But the man didn't move. He met the eyes, those piss yellow lights, and smiled. No fear. Just defiance. You've been hiding behind cries and shadows for how long now? Years. Decades. He took a step forward. Just one. Come out then. His voice dropped, steel-wrapped now. Stop playing like a child and do something. A long, guttural growl rose in the dark, deeper than before, filled with heat and acid and a threat no language could carry. The woods bent with it. A hot, damp gust rolled through the trees, thick with copper and bile. Still, the man stood. You know what I think, he said, stepping closer to the orchard trail's threshold. I think you're afraid. I think all this screaming and clawing and whispering, it's all just you trying to figure out how to be something you're not. Something real. The silence that followed was raw, violent. For the first time in its long, unnatural life, the thing didn't know how to respond. It could not remember this pattern. The man stood on the edge of the orchard, between the living and the hollow, waiting, daring. And somewhere behind the bark, beneath the leaves, inside the flesh of old earth, the thing finally understood one truth. It wasn't the only one watching anymore. It moved faster than wind, faster than instinct. One moment in the trees, the next, mid-lunge limbs unraveling, mouth blooming into 4 wet petals of bone and tendon, teeth glinting in the moonlight like shattered glass. The thing had never been resisted, never truly challenged. It roared as it came, no mimicry now, no lullaby voice, no soft childlike bait. This was rage. Old. Wet. Hungry. The noise shook the branches, sent owls from their perches. Leaves fled the air like they knew what was coming. But the man didn't flinch. He moved with precision. In one practiced motion, his hand slid beneath his coat and drew the weapon, a long-barreled, black-gripped .44 Magnum. It gleamed even in shadow, steel-soaked in stories that hadn't been told yet. The creature laughed as it flew. It knew bullets. Had felt them before. Had let men waste shells into the orchard soil and screamed into their open mouths as they died. This was nothing. Until the hammer dropped. Boom. The forest lit up with fire and recoil. The round slammed into the beast's rib cage, didn't pierce, no blood, but it hit. The sound was like metal meeting metal. Bone met thunder. The monster jerked midair, its trajectory broken, twisted. It hit the ground hard, limbs skidding through leaves and soil, spine slamming against a half-buried stone with a fleshy crack. It writhed. Not in pain. In shock. It looked up. And saw him. Those eyes. Not afraid. Not wide. just clear, night-born, measured. And the man's voice, carrying now through the orchard like a knife. Tell me, nightmares. He took a step forward, gun steady, eyes locked. Are you afraid of the dark yet? The thing hissed. A wet gurgle of disbelief. Its inner mouth quivered. Its ribs twitched, fracturing in strange, rippling patterns to heal. It tried to stand. The man raised the barrel again. Another step forward. No fear. Only focus. The thing felt it for the first time. Not pain. Not threat. Challenge. And for the first time since it crawled from whatever pit had birthed it into the orchard's roots, the thing took a step back. The man's voice was low now. Controlled. No shouting. No bravado. Just wait. He stood at the edge of the hollowed clearing, boots sinking slightly in the damp earth. Smoke curled from the barrel of the .44 Magnum in slow spirals, catching moonlight like breath. The creature watched him. Its body hunched, coiled unnaturally, all limbs and talons and twitching tongues. Acid dripped from the folds in its side, hissing softly as it hit the dirt. It didn't move. Not forward. Not this time. The man's eyes didn't waver. You've crawled out of the dark, and I don't know what pit spit you up. He raised the gun again, one-handed now. Calm. But I know what you've done. The thing quivered. Its mouth closed. Halfway. The inner jaw retreated. Its shape began to change slowly, subtly shifting towards something smaller, something more familiar, as if trying to wear innocence again. One of its arms contorted inward, resembling for a breath a child's curled fingers. The voice came next. Soft. Fragile. Help me. But the man didn't flinch. You think I haven't seen that trick before, he growled, stepping closer. You've said that to dying mothers. To lost kids. You used their voices while you fed on them. The wind caught the edges of his coat. The lantern on the trail behind him flickered, its glow stretching his shadow long across the orchard floor. You don't fool me. The thing let the mimic drop. It straightened not fully but enough for its shape to loom again. Spines flexed. Teeth bared. Muscles locked beneath sickly skin. But it didn't lunge. It knew now. The man wouldn't run. Wouldn't scream. Wouldn't die like the others. And the man, watching this once unstoppable thing hesitate, took one more step into the dark between them. You've killed enough people. His voice dropped to something colder. And I'm going to find out how to end you. The thing hissed. Not in hunger. In recognition. Because it had finally seen something it didn't know how to wear. A man who wasn't afraid. And somewhere deep in the folds of its ancient, rotting mind, it realized it might not be the predator anymore. The thing jerked back another step, its movements no longer fluid, panicked. Something was wrong. Something was new. Predators don't know fear until they meet something that doesn't run. The man holstered the magnum with a single practiced motion, never taking his eyes off the creature. His shoulders squared. He rolled his neck, slow, deliberate. The steel in his spine was louder than any bullet. The creature's spines flared. Its skin rippled as segments split open and closed again in rapid pulses. Acid hissed from its sides. Its rib cage flexed outward like it meant to make itself look larger. It wanted to intimidate. The man just smiled. "You're unraveling," he said, voice steady. "You've been the monster in the woods for so long, you forgot what happens when something walks into the dark looking for you." The air changed. Even the trees felt it. The orchard, old, cursed, saturated with centuries of whispers, tightened around them like a closed throat. The wind stopped. The moon dimmed behind something unnatural. The kind of dark that isn't cast by clouds, but by intent. And then the thing screamed. A real scream now. No mimicry. No stolen voice. A shrieking, broken, wet howl that blasted out from its splitting maw like a trumpet made of bone and rot. It shook the bark from trees, peeled paint from distant signs, sent birds falling dead from the sky. But the man didn't cover his ears. He walked forward. 2 steps. Then another. The creature struck. Not to kill, to test. A lashing arm, barbed and wet, snapped forward like a whip. The man ducked under it clean, grabbed the limb mid-strike and twisted. Not to break it, he couldn't, it wasn't built like anything meant to live, but the force of it stunned the thing. It shrieked again, but this time in frustration. The man ripped his coat open. There were scars across his chest. Old ones. Claw marks. Burn lines. Symbols inked deep in his skin, runes, sigils, things not taught in any school. One glowed faintly. "I've been waiting a long time to find you," he said. The creature backed up. Limbs twitching. Mouths closing. It blinked rapidly once, twice, wrongly, one eye at a time. "You think you're the only thing born in silence," he said. "You think fear made you." He stepped fully into the orchard. "You've lived too long in stories told by people who died screaming. But I learned the shape of those stories. I followed the path you carved." The creature's body shivered. Its flesh rippled. Its head twitched sideways as if its spine misfired. "Your time hiding behind the trees." The man reached into his pocket, pulled out a vial filled with a thick black fluid that shimmered like oil in a thunderstorm. "It's over." He crushed it in his bare hand. The fluid soaked into his palm. No scream. No pain. His veins lit for a second like wires catching fire and then dimmed. His eyes glowed faint gold. Not yellow. Gold. and the monster saw something it didn't understand. A man walking into the dark, with something older behind his eyes, and no fear in his heart. The thing recoiled, all grace gone. It moved like an animal, now erratic, disjointed, twitching from impulse, not instinct. The grove around them churned with something deeper than wind. The roots pulsed. The trees bent slightly, not toward the man but away from the creature. It wasn't the orchard protecting him. It was rejecting it. The man's palm still glowed faintly where the vial had shattered. The black fluid had sunk beneath his skin, disappearing into him like it had always belonged there. His eyes stayed gold. Not bright. Not holy. Righteous. "You smell that?" he said, taking another step forward, hands still dripping with whatever that thing was that should have burned through bone. The creature's body shifted. Haphazardly. Desperate. Its childlike frame split wider, exposed longer claws, taller limbs, a serpentine curve in its back as if trying to assume every shape at once. A man's silhouette. A child's size. A beast's length. A twisted, wet contradiction of anatomy and memory. "You don't smell right anymore," he muttered. "Not like rot. Not like blood. You smell like fear now." The monster charged. It screamed again, but no mimic this time. No cry of "Mommy" or "Help me." This was a noise without language, without culture, without the borrowed echo of the dead. This was its voice. And it was shrill, high-pitched, hungry. It came at him low, arms flared, jaw splitting open mid-leap. The man moved. Fast. Too fast. He sidestepped, drew the magnum again, and fired. The round hit the thing in its shoulder. It didn't pierce. It didn't need to. It hit like a goddamn truck. The impact spun the monster midair. It hit the ground on its side and tumbled, limbs folding and snapping, jaw clamping down on its own inner tongue by accident. It wailed. Real pain this time. Not mimicry. Not manipulation. The man holstered the magnum again and walked toward it. "You've been preying on fear so long," he said, voice low, even, "you forgot what courage looks like." The thing tried to stand, but one of its limbs was spasming, broken, or dislocated. Its back split again, gushing yellow-black mucus that steamed in the orchard soil. "You forgot what happens when someone stops running." It screeched, lashing upward with a blade talon. One last swing. One last desperate strike. The man caught it. He caught the creature's clawed wrist in his bare hand. And the glow from his palm ignited. A flare of golden fire, quiet, clean, burning without heat but with memory. The monster screamed again, but not like before. This time, it sounded young. It sounded like something that remembered being born in pain. And in that moment, he leaned in close, hands still wrapped around its arm as the golden light burned down through its veins like truth through lies. "Now you know," he whispered. "You're not the only one who crawled out of something." He let go. The creature collapsed backward into the dirt, limbs twitching, eyes wide. It didn't run. It didn't vanish. It watched him, breathing shallow, wounded, quiet. And for the first time in its long, ruinous life, it waited. Not to pounce, not to trick, but to listen. And the man, his name not yet spoken, not yet known by the wider world, but one that the dark things would soon remember, stood in the orchard and said nothing, because the message had already been delivered. The hunt had begun. The man stood over the writhing thing. Steam rose from the earth, from the place where his grip had seared into its limb, burning not flesh, but memory. Something deeper. Something older. The creature lay still now, bent in a position it had never taken before. Submissive. Arms curled against its torso. Ribcage folding in on itself like an animal trying to retreat inside its own skeleton. Its spines no longer stood. Its mouths no longer opened. Its eyes, those foul, yellow, hungry eyes, watched him. Not with rage. With recognition. With dread. The man knelt. Boots in the bile-slick soil. Magnum holstered. Palm still lit faint gold, pulsing now like a heartbeat in sync with the orchard around them. "You think you're the only one born in blood," he said softly. "You think I haven't stood in places darker than this? I breathed in the rot you were raised from." The thing hissed. A weak, pitiful noise. "Centuries," the man muttered. "You've whispered. Lurked. Federal lied." His hand closed into a fist. "But it ends here." He leaned in close, voice now barely a breath, barely a vibration. "You will hunt no more." The orchard shivered. Not from the creature. From the land. From the thing sleeping beneath it, all the hunger that wore the shape. It knew. It knew now. This man wasn't just immune to fear. He wasn't just armed. He was meant to come. He was made for this. The man stood, lifting his gaze to the broken treetops above. Fog coiled around him. Light bent near his shoulders. His silhouette was no longer just human. And then quietly, calmly, like it had always been planned, he turned his back on the beast. Walked away. Each step forward left the earth smoking behind him. The creature didn't follow. It didn't dare. Because now, the fear that had once lived in Peach Bottom had something to fear. The orchard remained silent long after he vanished into the trees. No birds returned. No wind stirred. The branches, once thick with watching eyes, bent low as if in mourning. The ground itself pulsed faintly, like a great thing buried too deep was trying not to breathe too loud. And the creature, the thing that had mimicked infants, called to the grieving, warned the voices of the lost. Lay still. Not dead. Not gone. But undone. For the first time in its long, night-born life, it knew the taste of a final warning. Not a blade. Not a flame. But a man. A man who didn't run. A man who walked into its hollow and named it. You will hunt no more. And the land remembered those words. Held them like roots hold bones. In the years that followed, Route 1 remained open. But the woods were different. Quieter. Tense. Like the breath before a prayer. And the missing? They stopped. Slowly. Then completely. No more cries in the tree line. No more twisted paths through the orchard. The road stayed haunted in story, but not in blood. Because something worse than a monster had passed through. Something older than the dark. Something ready. And in the farthest corner of Lancaster County, beneath soil heavy with centuries of grief, a broken thing lay curled, twitching in the memory of gold-lit eyes and a voice that would not bend. It would whisper. It would watch. But it would never hunt again. Because the story had changed. The nightmare had ended. And the dark now knew. It was being hunted too.
These cars are fairly new. Welcome to